Good morning in the United States and good afternoon to our friends in Europe. I'm Nancy Levesque, Communications Director for the Future of Privacy Forum. Welcome to this week's LinkedIn Live Privacy Chat. Today, we are talking about cross-border data flows, and we'll share the latest infographic that FPF has released to help audiences understand what they mean. With that, let me introduce FPF's CEO, Jules. Take it away, Jules.
Thanks, Nancy, for the setup, and thanks, Rob. Dr. Rob Van Eijk, our European Managing Director, joins me as well, and Rob really was the lead creator of the document that we're going to be discussing here today. Let me tell you what we tried to do. A lot of our audience, data protection commissioners, chief privacy officers, DPOs, legal privacy leads around the world, are obviously thinking through how to deal and how to respond to the Schrems decision, which has put us in a bit of a gray zone about how data can be moved from Europe to, well, most countries in the world, other than those that currently have an adequacy decision. And this can affect everything from, your communications with friends and relatives, even though it might be a one-time message from you. The company doing so is moving data large scale in a way that's captured. It could be the banking system. It can be paying employees. It can be any small and medium business working with the many vendors that it works with. Obviously, we're optimistic that there will be arrangements made, certainly between the US and Europe, where the legal systems are not as far apart as some sometimes believe, and where hopefully we'll see some changes from the Biden administration that can provide greater insight and maybe greater protections or limits on collection, as well as oversight. But with or without any changes that are made with an agreement that the US puts in place, most businesses do business globally around the world. And obviously the court didn't intend to create a void. We heard that very clearly from the judge who led the Schrems case, von Donowitz, in his comments on Data Privacy Day, where it seemed that the court might be a bit surprised that a void has been created where there's no legal certainty today for how data can be shared. Of course, he was pointing to some of the derogations, which, perhaps there'll be broader room, but for a wide range of data flows, the derogations are not going to be practical or useful. So we've got great sympathy for the challenge in front of the governments, the regulators, the EDPB, and others who need to thread the needle here. It's inconceivable to me that they expect that we shouldn't have data flows. I'm hearing already from pharma companies who are doing clinical trials, who do them across every region. I think we all desperately appreciate the need for good data, for instance, about pharma, but it doesn't have to be pharma. It can be the day-to-day business of paying employees and the like. So we saw last week a company in the US announced that it had lost a contract with a university in Europe, which had been signed and ready to go. And at the last minute, the legal lead at the university said, but this means data will go to the US. And he was quite upset. He had done a lot of work to small business to be GDPR compliant, and then suddenly to learn that the nervousness because of the gray zone. So we're sympathetic to the challenge that is in place, where we need to thread a legal needle, providing the kind of protections, of course, that the court intends, but ensuring that the rights and freedoms of people to communicate and to do research and to do commerce are supported. My certainty is that many in our audience here, you're the data protection geeks like us, so you've read many of the filings that people put in with the EDPB, pointing to different paths forward, risk-based approaches, others. Our goal is simply to help make sure that all the stakeholders have a good in-depth understanding of the kinds of data flows that are in place. I've seen some very sophisticated discussions, but I've also seen some discussions where it seems that people may think about this as some giant cloud and just keep your data in the cloud in Europe Why can't you just encrypt it? And so what we thought we would do to help many who maybe don't have the deeper look into what actually happens in a very common situation. We took a look at an online retailer. Every retailer is online nowadays, obviously. What happens behind the scenes? What are the different layers, the different steps, the different partners, the partners of partners? Where are they distributed? Where do they do their business? And then we took a look as well at remote education. We're all using tools today that help us teach, learn in classrooms at junior levels, at college levels. And again, the view might be that this is just some technology between the student and the university or the school. And what we wanted to do, and Rob, I think, and team really did a unique job doing this, is to show the levels, the complexity, the structure, so that when we think about safeguards and we think about the legal solutions, we do it with an understanding that there's many, many years of connections, link, contractors, subcontractors. I'll hand over to Rob, but I'll leave this last quick thought here. We're going to be brief this morning. Many of you are starting the week. There's a lot to do. Many years ago, when I was the chief privacy officer at a large technology company, I had 2 employees whose job was almost solely dedicated to constantly documenting and tracking the different places our data went. And when I started, I didn't want to hire 2 of my own people. I thought, I'll go to the CIO. She will certainly have this understanding. And she didn't. I'll go to the CSO, the chief security officer. And he didn't have it. I'll go to the CTO, and they didn't have it. It turns out that at any company of any complexity, the marketing department sets up a database. They want to use a certain vendor. That vendor has other sub-vendors. Do this 1,000 times over. And it turns out that most companies have been built off of layers and layers of partners and subcontractors and partners, with frankly limited awareness of where all of those partners are. Hopefully they've got good contracts in place, and hopefully they have a data flow map such as the one that I built. But I think the complexity of this is not well understood. Rob, so let me turn to you and perhaps to the retail data ecosystem. And again, this map here is a very high level map. I mean, we didn't even scratch the surface of the layers of partners and vendors in cloud. Would you walk us through a little bit what the chart, and I think we have it posted. If not, I'll ask the team to post it in the comments right here under this announcement so people can see what you are looking at as we go through it. So let me turn to you. Online retail, what actually happens sort of behind the scenes?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jules. Yeah, obviously, retail is just one of the contexts that we chose to look at in a little bit more detail. And the reason is because it's very easy to relate to what types of subservices or vendors or sub-processors a company may interact with in the cloud. We could also look at, for instance, finance or health or food, or maybe, which you would not directly relate to personal data, but automotive and electricity are other contexts as well that we could have mapped out equally. But if we look at, for instance, what happens in this black box of a company when it's about retail, and obviously the retailer is a complex ecosystem of many different vendors, and they use cloud services for hosting the databases, the different application servers. They want to make sure data can flow from one department to another department. It needs to be accessible for the employees in the way the company is structured with their work processes. And a lot of the software that the company uses obviously is not installed locally. No, they use platform software, for instance, for e-commerce. And typically, these software elements are deployed in the cloud. It's public cloud, so you can access those through the internet. Similar to having an email server, which a lot of companies do not manage themselves anymore because it's a complicated type of software. and in a lot of companies, still the dominant way to communicate with each other within the company. So there's a big choice of moving all that complexity to specialist vendors who can not just make sure that your software runs smoothly, but also make sure that all the updates are applied and that it's secure and that it's continuously monitored. We've seen with the data breaches that it's important that all these systems maintain log files and that you're able to detect anomalies in case of there's a security breach, which means you need specialist people to help you maintain these operational work processes. Now, in the retail context, we also serve platforms for serving video content, for storage providers and other types of content. Data analytics, of course, is in the online retailing an important thing to be used by the retailer employees for interactive dashboards, for data mining, for visualizations, scorecards, etc. Obviously, there's a lot of machine learning happening on the data to make informed decisions. Human resource management, one of the key components in many organizations. Outward looking, the customer relationship management platforms. But if we look at an individual employee level, the usual office applications to send memos, documents, sheets, emails, etc. Those are all typically elements which you can put in the cloud. But also, if you narrow it down, for instance, to a customer-facing website, there are many mini services in that website that make the user experience optimized. For instance, you see like a little chat bot that may pop up, which interacts with a human resource, a customer resource management element. There are specific vendors that be able to send out SMS messages, or for multi-factor authentication, for example, or to confirm delivery. Well, I can really run down the whole list of different elements we have here in the backend.
And the interesting point is that each of these is often provided by a specialist, company, which may have its own contractors and subcontractors. And in many cases, nobody made the decision to contract based on, well, where does this company actually have its servers? Or frankly, it doesn't have its own servers. It uses another set of cloud services, let alone its vendors, right? There are certainly, one hopes, contracts and protections in place, but none of these decisions ever had to be made. This is, the miracle of the internet, or the curse of the internet, perhaps, but none of these decisions ever had to be made with where do you sit, but rather who's the best at providing the best service, the most secure, the best price, the most easy to integrate into my system. And I think the other thing that you touched on, which bears maybe repeating, when you do your business in the cloud is not a big storage place of many servers, right? What makes the cloud such a unique business opportunity and why it's become so important isn't solely that, hey, why do I need to build my own servers? Why do I need to buy my own servers? It's nicer to just pay a fee and use it in an outsourced way. It's that the cloud services are platforms for thousands and thousands of other services. So once I moved some set of my data into the cloud, I then made 100 other decisions that I would like to now activate this service, this tool, this partner. So the entire stack is integrated and happening in the cloud. And those services live in their own locations and their own clouds. And so I was thinking of it, what can we say? It's not a cake, because I can, if it was a 7-layer cake, I could probably maybe take a thin knife, and separate it. I was making an omelet yesterday with all sorts of different, vegetables. And I was thinking like, okay, now if I had to say, make sure you're cutting this up right. I don't know. Maybe it's not the right example. We'll have to come up with something. Not an omelet, not a cake. If anybody in the comments has a better suggestion to really give a good example of what we're talking about. Maybe tiramisu. Maybe after you stirred it up. I don't know. I like tiramisu. Rob, let's look at the EdTech data flows, because this is something that obviously has become essential to life. And you can think of this as maybe very local typically, because it's serving, a local school or a university. I think here you also really convincingly showed us that there's such a vast number of partners and suppliers and sub-vendors as well that are involved with simply helping a school manage all the different tools it needs today to operate in the digital age.
Jules, I like the analogy with the cake, because it shows that it's not like the classical typical software that you would expect. It's like the application that you launch. Now it's actually a layered, basically the collection of different applications that are tied together through a cloud network infrastructure. And the reason why this virtual application in the cloud is a good analogy of the cake is because it's important to have access to the software without any delay. So typically, also in the EdTech context, edge caches are used across borders. This makes that the content is replicated to be as close as possible to the one who is interacting. And this could be a student, this could be a tutor, but this could also be staff that works at that software company. So this caching of data and it is also named as load balancing and sharing content across multiple machines, across multiple jurisdictions. It's often not very clear where the data is. And typical use cases would be to include online classroom or video calls to collaborate with one each other in a teaching context. But there are also applications to inform parents and students about important developments. We see that learning management systems and learning content providers, we really embrace a whole collection of different functionalities. And the key point here is that many of these providers rely on a global network of subsidiaries to support, maintain, and secure these products 24/7. I mean, we're dealing with a sensitive context. It's about education. People want to be able to learn, and this needs to be a safe environment. So the data needs to be protected very well. And the service providers that deliver the hosting and other specialist service together basically enable this type of software. And within that realm of EdTech, we also see, similar to retail, we see custom relationship management tools and client support applications, for instance, to handle tickets of functionalities that do not work well, or when a new school enters into a contract with an EdTech supplier to make sure they configure their products correctly. We see companies providing specialist expertise to make sure it's stable and secure, performance management monitoring, and so-called outsourced security operating centers, but also things like applications for managing privacy, security, and compliance programs provided by third parties. And most of the times, these are cloud-based as well. And from my perspective, if I used to study quite recently still at the Leiden University, the authentication and single sign-on is most of the times an important feature that's been used as well. Obviously, we've seen over the last year that multi-factor authentication has been enabled in many different cloud applications. And to be able to do that, you typically would rely on a service provider that's specialized in this type of security features as well.
Rob, since we're on video, and I think we've all seen how the different services, whatever brand you use, have struggled to be able to keep, at first you could only have 10 people on the screen, and then they could have 100, and now, it's expanding, and we still see a lot of glitches and flows, in terms of really managing these things well. And I think we've all become much more, inclined to be binging, whether it's Netflix or other, services. This is like one of the things we all do during the pandemic. You pointed out, I think, a really interesting technology point. that, again, maybe not everybody fully appreciates. You can sit and think that you're watching some video that is sitting on Netflix's servers. And indeed, the entire video service for many services lives in one of the cloud services, of course. But number two, and Rob mentioned this with ad tech and with video, the way we get this instantly and the way we can replay it and the way we can, have the vast content available to us instantly is those services all push out to every corner of the internet cached versions of the most popular shows. And so you are not creating this giant roadblock, right? Even if the servers at Netflix or Netflix's cloud system were huge, you can imagine, or Zoom or LinkedIn or WebEx, you can imagine the roadblock of all of this digital traffic trying to come at the same time, through these same tubes and pipes. And the reality is this has been distributed throughout the world and is actually being provided to us from local servers, local content, local distributors. And so, you know what? I came up while you were talking with maybe the better example. It's not tiramisu. It's not 7-layer cake. It's a real pasta with vegetables and meat and spices that have been really stirred in. It's this giant bowl of pasta, and all of a sudden we need to have different rules and different protections and sort of unravel it in a way that we could, apply safeguards. You couldn't do it. You'd have to make yourself a new bowl of pasta. You couldn't practically, today do so. So I think we certainly see how the solutions are going to be have to be careful and nuanced. So we do want to have a real policy discussion here today. Again, I think we all understand that the challenges of the safeguards that are needed are going to need to have a good understanding of the complexity of today's data flows. You know how I looked at it when I saw perhaps the initial decision and some of the initial guidance? I said, if we were told that you needed to make a cell phone only in the US or only in Europe or only in India, I think most experts who are close to that process would say this is impossible because there are rare minerals that are only available in China or Brazil or other places in the world that are not available in this country or mined in adequate levels, or the chips of the multiple different kinds of chips that are used are not available. They're not manufactured in this country, or the assembly is not done here in this country, right? You might say, go ahead and build the sector and build all the parts of the supply line, and it would probably take you years to do so, but you couldn't conceivably say, I'm going to build, oh, by the way, now, immediately, do it now, because it is illegal for you to be importing or using these parts, right? And so when I saw some of the decision and some of the early thinking, I said, we've created a legal void, and the court did not intend to create a legal void. I see a question, the cloud as a platform. Help, please. Is that like an operating system? Yes, the cloud is a platform for other platforms. So this is what is happening under the hood. So is it data manipulation by users? Well, how you set up and how you respect the user rights needs to be in place, whether it's sitting on your giant mainframe computer, which it actually never is, or whether it's sitting in the cloud. This is the pipes under the hood. The data protection rights and freedoms for the individual need to exist, whether we're talking about a bowl of spaghetti or whatever your favorite is. Okay, let me close by, Rob, I don't know if you knew this. Maybe you know, I don't know as much as I should about Romanian culture, but evidently the March 1st is the beginning of spring in the tradition. And there is a very nice holiday called Martisor. And so our colleague Gabriela Zanfa Fortuna has advised us that today is the first day of Martisor. It's typically celebrated with flowers and small tokens wrapped with a white and red thread. It's a tradition for many centuries, and typically streets and villages are bustling, and it's a beautiful time to wish people a happy spring. Not a lot bustling outside my window here in Potomac, Maryland, and DC. I suspect in the Netherlands also not so much bustling, but for our friends who are celebrating and for those beyond, happy Martisor to you all. Rob, thanks for joining me. Please download the infographic. All of our materials are always available under open licensing. Please give us some credit because it makes us feel good, but you can download it, mix it, use it, and hopefully it can be a useful educational tool. So thanks, team, for setting it up. Thanks for joining me, Rob, and we wish you a good day. Oh, we have a quick message from Simon Hanya. Let's see. Simon has mapped out a value chain and transfers of responsibility rather than actual data flows. Do we have to find out whether the bits from the Netherlands to Ireland traverse the UK, a third country, or do we need to build a new sea cable not touching the UK? All right, we have to invite Simon to join us maybe next week because I don't know if we have the time to get into it today, but he always, as is often, points out the interesting points to jump into. So, Simon, save the date. We're going to get you for a bit of a chat. And Simon, just to put on your radar screen, if we still have you with us, I'm trying to figure out what the new SECs, since they say very clearly that they're not for data that is subject to the GDPR, then what kind of a giant hole are we left with? And you saw in the EDPB's comments back to the EC sort of a clarification saying, well, are you saying that that isn't even a transfer? And that's why clearly that's not what you meant. Well, I don't know. Maybe that is what they meant. And I am eager to look at the opinion for the UK and understand exactly how this issue is being spelled out. So quite a surprise to see this new idea that we aren't clear on exactly what is a transfer so many years into GDPR and data protection. But okay, it's a good time to re-examine and rethink many of the issues. Thanks, everybody. Happy Monday. Happy Martisor.
Bye-bye.